It was one of those nights where everything seemed perfectly still, the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavier than usual. The lobby was quiet, the dim golden lights casting long shadows across the polished floor. I had been sipping my coffee behind the reception desk, scrolling absent-mindedly through the night log, when the clock struck midnight. The soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound, and for a while, it was comforting. But then, something shifted. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. The quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watchful. My eyes kept drifting to the glass doors at the entrance, half expecting to see someone standing there. No one was. I told myself I was just tired, that my imagination was playing tricks on me. Still, my pulse quickened in a way I couldn't explain. A faint creak echoed from the far end of the hallway leading to the old wing of the hotel. I froze. That section hadn't been used in weeks. All the rooms there were under renovation. I leaned slightly forward, listening, but the sound didn't come again. I forced a laugh at myself, shaking off the thought. Maybe it was the building settling. Old hotels always had their quirks. I returned to the guest ledger, but my mind kept wandering back to that hallway. Something about it nagged at me, an itch I couldn't quite scratch. I remembered how the maintenance staff joked about the old wing, how strange things happened there, especially at night. I had never put much stock in their ghost stories, but sitting alone in that empty lobby, I started to wonder if there was a grain of truth to them. Then I heard it again, another creak, louder this time, followed by the faintest sound of footsteps. My chest tightened. Whoever it was shouldn't be there. I picked up the phone to call security, but for some reason, I hesitated. A part of me needed to know, needed to see for myself. Grabbing the flashlight from under the counter, I stepped out from behind the desk. The beam of light cut through the shadows, but somehow, the darkness seemed to swallow it at the edges. As I moved toward the hallway, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. It was the kind that pressed in on you, made you aware of every breath you took. Something was there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. And in that moment, I knew my quiet night had turned into something far more unsettling than I was prepared for. It was around 1:30 in the morning when the front door slid open, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the lobby. I looked up from my desk, expecting to see a late check-in dragging a suitcase or maybe a couple returning from a night out. Instead, a single man stepped inside. He wasn't carrying any luggage, no backpack, no briefcase, nothing. Just himself, tall and rigid, his coat buttoned all the way up despite the mild weather. He didn't come straight to the desk. He stood by the entrance for a few moments, his eyes sweeping over the lobby like he was taking in every detail. I gave my usual polite smile, but it felt strange when he didn't smile back. Finally, he approached, his footsteps deliberate and slow, each one echoing against the tiled floor. "Do you have a room available?" His voice was deep, almost too calm, as if every word was chosen carefully. There was no trace of hurry in him, but something about his gaze made me uneasy. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. They seemed to look just past me, as though he were watching something I couldn't see. "Yes, sir." "For how many nights?" I asked, trying to keep my tone professional. "One," he replied. But he didn't take out his ID or a credit card like most guests. He simply stood there, waiting, like he knew I'd give him the key no matter what. When I prompted him for details, he finally slid his ID across the desk, his hand pale and cold when my fingers brushed against it. His name was short, common, forgettable, but there was something about it that made me certain I'd seen it before. As I entered his information, I noticed something strange in the reflection of the computer screen. For a split second, it looked like his face wasn't quite the same. Like a shadow passed over it, altering the shape of his features. When I blinked, it was gone, and he was just staring at me again, expressionless. He requested a room in the old wing, the same section I had heard noises from earlier that night. No guest had asked for those rooms in months. I told him it was under renovation, but he simply said, "That's fine," his voice leaving no room for argument. Against my better judgment, I gave him the key. As he walked away, I noticed he didn't head toward the elevators. Instead, he turned toward the dark hallway of the old wing without hesitation, his footsteps fading into the distance. And even after he was gone, I could still feel his presence lingering in the lobby, as if the air itself had shifted with his arrival. Not long after the strange guest disappeared into the old wing, the hotel seemed to change. The soft hum of the air conditioner now felt louder, almost like a low growl reverberating through the walls. I tried to distract myself by finishing the night reports, but every few minutes, I found my eyes drifting toward the hallway he'd taken. Around 2:15 a.m., the phone on the front desk rang. I picked it up, expecting it to be an external call, but the display showed it was coming from one of the guest rooms, room 308. My heart skipped a beat. That was the room I had assigned to him. When I answered, there was nothing on the line. No voice, no background noise. Just breathing. Slow, steady, almost mechanical. "Hello? Sir, is everything all right?" I asked, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. No answer. The breathing stopped abruptly, replaced by a faint click as the call disconnected. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it could have been a prank or a crossed line. But then, barely 10 minutes later, I saw movement on the security monitor. The camera for the old wing showed him standing in the middle of the hallway, not moving, just staring at the lens. He was far away from the camera, but somehow, it felt like he was looking directly at me through the screen. Before I could call security, the feed glitched, static filling the monitor for a few seconds. When it cleared, the hallway was empty. I rewound the footage, but the recording froze right at the moment before he vanished. Not long after, the elevator dinged. My stomach tightened as I looked up, expecting him to step out. Instead, the door slid open to reveal nothing. No one inside. But the light above the elevator indicated it had come down from the 3rd floor. Then came the smell, faint at first, but growing stronger. It was metallic, like rust or blood, drifting in from the old wing. I gripped the desk, torn between calling the police and going to check it out myself. Just as I was about to make a decision, the front doors hissed open. A cold draft swept into the lobby, though no one entered. My skin prickled as the realization hit me: whatever had come into the hotel that night wasn't just a man. And whatever it wasn't alone anymore. By 3 a.m., I could no longer pretend that what was happening was just my imagination. I had locked the front doors, called security twice with no answer, and kept my eyes fixed on the surveillance monitors. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was moving just beyond the edges of the camera's view. I decided to check the old guest records, thinking maybe that man's name would show up somewhere. The hotel had been operating for decades, and the archives were stored in a dusty filing cabinet in the back office. My hands trembled as I flipped through the faded paper files, the musty smell of old paper mixing with the lingering metallic scent in the air. And then I found it. His name. Same spelling, same initials, listed under a check-in date from over 20 years ago. My breath caught as I scanned the rest of the entry. The notes beside it were smudged, but I could make out a few words: found in room, no signs of forced entry, and unexplained death. A chill ran down my spine. The old wing had been partially closed off since that incident. I remembered overhearing whispers from longtime staff about a guest who was found dead in his room under strange circumstances, but I had never connected it to the man I had just checked in. According to these records, he should have been dead. The lobby suddenly felt colder, the shadows deeper. I turned back to the monitors, my eyes darting to the feed for room 308. The door was wide open. I leaned closer, my pulse pounding in my ears. And then, movement, someone stepping out into the hallway. But it wasn't just him. There was another figure with him, blurred and almost translucent, moving in an unnatural, jerking motion, as if it didn't belong in this world. I blinked, and the second figure was gone. The man, however, remained. He stood there for several seconds before slowly turning toward the camera. this time, he smiled. And I knew, without a shred of doubt, that he was aware of what I had just discovered. I stepped back from the desk, my breathing shallow. The truth wasn't just that he had been here before. It was that he had never left. And now, somehow, I was part of whatever had kept him tied to this place. The clock read 3:45 a.m. when I realized I was no longer alone in the lobby. I hadn't heard the doors open, hadn't heard footsteps, but I felt the shift in the air, an almost electric tension prickling against my skin. Slowly, I lifted my head from the monitors, and there he was. The man from room 308 stood just a few feet away from the desk, his coat still buttoned up, his face pale and expressionless. "I never checked out," he said quietly, his voice carrying an unnatural weight, as if it came from somewhere far deeper than his chest. My throat tightened, and every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. Before I could speak, the lights above us flickered, casting the lobby into brief flashes of darkness. And in those moments when the light cut out, I saw them, shapes moving around him. Dozens of them. Shadows, human-shaped but twisted, crawling along the floor and walls like insects. Every time the lights returned, they vanished, only to reappear in the next blink. "You opened the door for me," he continued, stepping closer. His gaze locked on mine, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, deep, endless black, swallowing the whites completely. "And now you've seen too much to leave." I stumbled back, my hand fumbling for the phone, but when I grabbed it, the line was dead. A soft whisper rose behind me, so close it brushed against my ear. It wasn't his voice. It was many voices, layered, overlapping, muttering words I couldn't understand. My knees buckled, and I turned, but there was no one there. When I looked back, he was standing on the other side of the counter. I hadn't seen him move. His hand rested on the bell, fingers thin and unnaturally long. "Room 308 has been waiting," he said. "They all have." In the reflection of the lobby's glass doors, I saw the truth, the second figure from before, and now more, surrounding me. Their faces were blurred, but I could feel their hunger. They weren't guests. They were the ones who had never checked out, bound to this place, and somehow, I had been chosen to join them. The last thing I remember before the lights went out completely was his smile, cold, knowing, and the feeling of countless hands closing in. When the darkness swallowed me, I understood the chilling truth: I was no longer the manager of this hotel. I was just another permanent resident.